We are recording.
Are we though? Are we though?
Yes.
Well then, hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. For this particular series, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, that darn kitty.
Dorkus and I are both going into this story completely new with almost no knowledge of the story or world.
Each segment, we intend to cover what happens in each new chapter and discuss our experience along the way.
Hold on to your butts, because this is Ascension Unleashed, a blind read-through, and today we'll be covering Chapter 3!
Chapter 3!
Yeah, getting into it.
Yes, not a bad chapter.
Mm-hmm.
We get probably the thing that stabbed Fedek, right?
Oh, yes, that makes sense. Yes, that is it. That is it. Sorry, I just never put it together. Not that I never did. It's that I wasn't ready for that.
That was like the very first thing I thought when I saw that, and I was like, Thank
you, big great reveal. But like, who? Oh gosh, we'll get to it. We'll talk about the
get to that.
And why now? Why now? You know,
right? We got some. Oh my gosh, why aren't the words coming? I know the concept that I want to bring up.
It's like you've got my brain now. Shame, I feel so sweet.
You've infected me, Kitty. It's about Elend and Vin. We finally learn what Elend and Vin's relationship is sort of like beyond Valette Renault now, and that was really, really exciting for me.
Yeah, that was nice. That was good. It's needed because like we had a time jump, and we didn't have time to go into how they navigated those first few changes between Valette and Vin, which one's which. So we have to see the after effect of that, and I think it's illustrated quite nicely.
Right, and we get a little bit of insight into how the assembly works. It was the assembly, right?
Yeah, his new government is the assembly. Yes,
and there's a lot more too. But before we get into that, in all of the episodes since the end of the first book and now, have I ever asked what has been made of Kelsier's religion since then? There's been no mention of it.
Yeah, we haven't found that missing, if you know what I'm saying. We haven't said, yeah, we haven't asked about it. Indeed.
Right. Like,
what has become
are there religious ceremonies? Is there a practice? Are there holidays?
I mean, we know they have a square.
Yes.
The square of the survivor. Like, we know that kind of became a thing, but that's a cultural thing. We don't know that that's an actual religious thing. Like, do people go on pilgrimages there and things? No. So what has become of it? Because it's weird to call it a religion now, because it's like that makes me think of organized religion and, you know, priests and texts and things like that. So I don't think it's fledged into a religion yet. Just from my instinct of it, because there might be fanatics out there maybe that have taken it up and created it, because that's what I'm trying to think. We're seeing with this Kelsier religion, it hasn't been created yet, but we have the inciting incident of the religion, and we haven't been witness to how, say, some fanatical person would take that and make an organized religion out of it. So it's a cultural thing at the moment. Somebody somebody would have to create a cult for it.
Well, in theory, the crew would be the equivalent of the apostles, right?
Yeah. But what is the message of Kelsier's religion? So you see, because when I think of it as religion, I think of like they now praise Kelsier and whatever, and they go off the charts. You know what I'm saying? Like, they go out. What would the apostles do?
Name?
Yeah. So what's the crew's message, if you know what I'm saying?
And that I don't know yet. We know Ham is captain of the guard. Mm-hmm. Good for him. Promotion. Promotion. But he doesn't strike me as the type to go out proselytizing Kelsier.
I think, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like most of them aren't that way because they know Kelsier. That's one of the things that
Yeah.
Vin always says. Well, we know Kelsier when she speaks to what's it?
Well, that would put the onus on others, in our mind at least, to propagate religious dictates. But are the crew gonna just be okay with that?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm not thinking that it needs to be done. That it's like, hey, the crew should work on this. I'm thinking that other people can take advantage of it and create something that they have no control over and create something that is dangerous to them.
Right.
Mm.
And then speaking of all of that, I was also thinking, what are the odds that there are still kingdoms out there loyal to the Lord Ruler?
Like territories.
Yeah. I don't think Straff Venture is the kind that would still be loyal to the Lord Ruler and his memory. But I could see others wanting vengeance or something.
Yeah. Look, we're looking at, with Venture, we're looking at somebody who's not wanting vengeance. They just want power. But there could be people using vengeance as an excuse for power, or both. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that there has been a time jump, so there's a lot of stuff we don't know.
Yeah,
which is exciting, and I think we're suffering from the same thing of, when we first started the first book, it was the pace, because it was the pace. The pace was frustrating because it's the beginning of the book. That's the part where you start chewing on it, and you will read a huge chunk of it. But obviously, we're going chapter by chapter, so that at this point we have all of our questions just pending, just hanging in the air, which is part of the whole experience
and part of the fun.
And
then the other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was Elend. I'm actually quite excited for his arc in this book and what may or may not become of it, because he has been so focused on collaborative politics. Now suddenly he's in a position where I don't think others are going to be willing to collaborate with him. There are going to be hostile forces out there, whether he likes it or not.
These people do not negotiate with him. He's not they are not interested in negotiating with him. So he's wants to be collaborative and joyous. It's like, yeah, but you need buy-in from both sides for that to happen. And how do you bring that?
Right. And that's all well and good if all you have to do is convince a group of 20 people or some odd number. It's all well and good if you can make friends with one or two kingdoms. But what happens when, what
happens when war happens?
Yeah. It's all well and good if you only have to collaborate with a few people within your own system of government who, in theory, want the well-being of the country, one would hope. But what do you do when there is an antagonistic force? And these are generations removed from separate kingdoms.
Yes.
Elend has
one empire.
Yeah. Elend, and I don't think anyone else has any real idea what it means to have countless different governments, all self-serving, etc.
Yeah, just because it's the fair way of doing it doesn't mean it's the easy way.
Yeah.
And his arc is going to be about trying to navigate that, because humans are humans. We still have humanity in us, and what happens when the only option seems to be violence?
Yes. And without further ado, shall we get into it?
Let's go.
My brethren ignore the rest of the facts. They cannot connect the other strange things that are happening. They are deaf to my objections and blind to my discoveries.
Right. So my response to that immediately was, okay, Dorkus is onto something with who's writing this. That this is somebody who's this is him speaking about, no, I'm wrong about this guy, the hero of ages. So we are with the epigraphs, we are now on the mystery of who is the hero of ages. That's what I'm thinking. And we're following what I think is Quan here.
Yeah, I'm still getting Quan vibes from this, but I don't necessarily think this is about discovering that Epigraph Man isn't the hero of ages. I think this could potentially be realizing that the deepness exists. These strange things I'm imagining are early signs of the deepness, the 10 plagues, if you will.
Yeah, it's the vehicle for explaining things about the deepness to us.
Yeah. We know that Quan was very much an outsider amongst his Terrace philosopher buddies. We know that he was an eccentric, studying things, and that's kind of what led him away from Terrace. So those are things that I thought.
Well, we could, yeah, I suppose we could see him connecting the dots with the deepness, and because he did proclaim that this guy, he was in agreement that this guy's the guy, but then he changed his mind, so we could go on that whole journey. Anyway, I'm for epigraph mysteries. They frustrate me, but I like them.
Yeah, they're fun.
Let's go.
Elend dropped his pen to his desk with a sigh, then leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. He figured that he knew as much about political theory as any living man. He'd certainly read more about economics, studied more about governments, and held more political debates than anyone he knew. He understood all the theories about how to make a nation stable and fair, and had tried to implement those in his new kingdom. He simply hadn't realized how incredibly frustrating a parliamentary council would be. Yeah.
That was a great. It's like, yeah, that's a big undertaking. You can't just be like, well, now everything is fair. Again, now everything is fair. Everyone has a voice or whatever. Everyone's represented. Now we're good. No.
Utopia.
No, that's not how it goes. It's actually kind of comical to have it go through that, because you're like, well, duh.
Standing up, he walked over to get some chilled wine. About to pour, he glanced out his balcony doors. In the distance, a glowing haze shone through the mists, the campfires of his father's army. He put down the wine. He was already exhausted, and the alcohol probably wouldn't help. Well, at least he's not an alcoholic.
Yeah, he's not leaning into his cup there.
I can't afford to fall asleep until I get this done, he thought, forcing himself to return to his seat. The assembly would meet soon, and he needed to have the proposal finished tonight. Elend picked up the sheet, scanning its contents. His handwriting looked cramped even to him, and the page was scattered with crossed-out lines and notations, reflections of his frustration. They'd known about the army's approach for weeks now, and the assembly still quibbled about what to do. Some of its members wanted to offer a peace treaty. Others thought they should simply surrender the city. Still others felt that they should attack without delay. Elend feared that the surrender faction was gaining strength, hence his proposal. The motion, if passed, would buy him more time. As king, he already had prime right of parley with a foreign dictator. The proposal would forbid the assembly from doing anything rash until he'd at least met with his father. Okay, there's a lot there, but it's important to note the factions. Peace treaty, surrender, fight. It makes sense to me that if you're in a gridlock and you cannot decide what to do, more and more people will default to surrender. That seems logical to me, yeah?
Yeah, it's like, how do we survive this? What's the most likely way we can try and survive? Just like, oh, fine. We fight, we're probably going to die. So let's just try and surrender. Peace is too difficult as well. So just, you know what? I'm fine. Let's just roll over and can, be okay. It makes sense that's the factions that exist. And then he's leaning into the whole king thing as well. So he's like, well, I kind of have this right. I have a little bit of say. So I will use that to delay going to whatever answer they're going to give.
Right. I will act within the confines of my own power here to affect change as best I can.
Because he knows... Sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say, because he knows Straff, right?
No, but no, I was going to say because he knows that he can't, to himself, he can't just do what he wants. He's very sure that he can't just go and make the decision himself and be like the Lord Ruler and decide. As much as he has his own opinion, he can't just enforce that.
Right.
If he is to be this fair guy that he's trying to be, and having the pressures of the situation on ruling is really fascinating. That's what I'm here for. That's what you meant by his arc. I'm interested in how he tries to deal with that, because he's got this bit. He's got knowledge, but he's also got that naivete. It's like,
right.
Well, it's fair, so it should work. It's like, but then the rest, like we were saying, what happens when somebody is not negotiating with you? What do you do then? Yeah.
Now, maybe one day through this book, I will go an episode without complaining about King Elend, but I have been critical about Ska willingness to accept King Elend. One would imagine that I don't know how many people know Straff, but House Venture should have had a reputation as being uniquely harsh. That was the impression that I got in the first book. So assuming that this assembly is hopefully made up of at least a couple Ska, one would hope that realizing if you surrender to Straff, you're really not going to be in a good position.
Yeah, that's a good angle to bring to them. But then somebody who is, say, again, like thinking of politics, somebody that's now trying to take over from Elend could use that and be like, well, look, try and really emphasize he's a Venture and he is not a Ska. So think about that, guys. Yeah, people can use his not Ska-ness against him. And we don't know. So we know there's these factions in, say, I was going to say the court, but you know what I'm saying, like in the assembly. But we don't know what their motives are. Like, I would imagine if there are some noblemen in it, they have their own workings that they're trying to do. Maybe there are some Ska that are power hungry now, and they're like, it's my turn kind of thing. So there's opportunity there for a lot of juicy character stuff. But we're only getting Elend's POV.
I think that's all really valid. I suppose I had this inherent assumption that by surrendering, Straff would dismantle whatever government Elend comes up with. So it seems to me that surrendering is giving up whatever power you could have achieved thus far. It should make you want to fight to protect that power, right? And what happened to the revolutionary, willing to die fighting the Lord Ruler energy? Because
that's when you bring that up, that energy, I'm like, that's not coming from the noblemen. They didn't have that energy. They were just like, we want a voice in Parliament, basically. And whereas the Ska, like, could we maybe, I don't know, have our lives back? You know,
I want a voice in Parliament so I can give up my voice in Parliament.
Yeah, exactly. Like, exactly. It's, oh gosh. But there would be people. I think the surrender people are just fear people. They scared.
Yeah.
That's it. Which is what happens with surrender. It's just like, okay, we can't exactly. You're gonna catch me if I run. So, okay, hands up. I'm fine. Just be gentle. Kill me quick.
Freedom is hard.
Yeah.
Unironically, you hear stories about people that come from countries where they aren't free, and suddenly they're free, and it's like this big, scary, paralyzing thing.
Freedom is responsibility.
Yes. But that brings us to the peace treaty offer. An initial offer of peace is, I think, fair and wise. You know, give peace a chance, but
make it an option.
Yeah. Always have that option if you can. But I suspect Straff is not going to accept that. So
yeah, why would he?
Yeah. 50,000 to 20,000.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, no, I'll take my odds. I'll take my chances. And he just doesn't seem to be a peace-loving guy in any case, especially he doesn't really like his son very much.
No. And then that will bring us to the attack without delay faction. And that puts us in a weird situation where I think 20,000 v 50,000, the best offense is a good defense. You
Exactly.
stay within the city walls, and so long as they aren't doing a siege, if you have sufficient food, etc., which it sounds like they might not have all that much of, I'd be hesitant to meet Straff on the field.
Yeah.
But then that runs the risk of, oh, the king is just twirling his fingers while we starve. So if there's a way to maneuver a 20 v 50 successful offensive, I want to hear those tactics, those strategies. I'm open to the idea, but we'll see. I'm nervous.
Yeah, there would have to be some factor that makes that a good idea. It doesn't seem like a good idea to go out of the city. Like, I need to be convinced of that. Because that was the whole reason they took the city, and they were happy to take the city because it's defensible.
And then that brings me to my next big question: is how much territory outside of Luthadel does Luthadel have? Do they have farmland? Do they have other things?
Just because Luthadel has been taken over now, I suppose, by Ellen, what does it mean for surrounding areas, other areas? Is there support from them at all? It's been a long enough time so there might have been some ways to gather support, but we don't know, which, that's the beginning of the book syndrome that we have to deal with.
Yeah. I'm looking at the map again, and I see northern dominance, western dominance, etc., but I'm not seeing states, so to speak, or kingdoms.
Yeah.
So
I think they would be on the scale of towns and cities, trying to get cities behind them.
Right.
That's as close as they could get. And also, just one of my things I was still wondering about is who has the Kolos? What are the Kolos?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm like, because remember you were like, they're kind of like, I think it was that they're a kind of creature or race of people.
Yeah, like orcs or something.
Or is it like just a division? I don't think it does. I don't get that feel that it's like a division of his army or something like that. It seems like that they are something rather than someone.
Right. Well, weren't they referred to as monstrosities?
Yeah, I don't know if we were using the word monsters.
We'll have to go back and look on that one later, I think.
Yeah, that they destroy everything, apparently. That's why I thought of them as, So point is, we have not spoken of them as a factor here. Unless, if Straff, say, had them and they were part of his army here, I think we would have heard that. They would have said that by now.
I agree.
Yeah. So
anyway,
yes. Go.
Ellen sighed again, dropping the sheet. The assembly was only 24 men, but getting them to agree on anything was almost more challenging than any of the problems they argued about. 24 men. Cool. Let's see. Ellen turned, looking past the solitary lamp on his desk, out through the open balcony doors and toward the fires. Overhead, he heard feet scuttling on the rooftop, Vin going about her nightly rounds. Ellen smiled fondly, but not even thinking of Vin could restore his good temper. That group of assassins she fought tonight. Can I use that? Perhaps if he made the attack public, the assembly would be reminded of the disdain Straff had for human life, and then be less likely to surrender the city to him. But perhaps they'd also get frightened that he'd send assassins after them, and be more likely to surrender. So he too makes an assumption that I think the two of us made last chapter, yeah?
Yeah. That is like, and that's exactly, it was not after.
That the assassins were not sent by Straff, yeah. Sometimes Ellen wondered if the Lord Ruler had been right. I remember reading that the first time, and I was like,
about what?
Excuse me?
About what? Sorry, you got to clarify that. And yes, he does.
Not in oppressing the people, of course, but in retaining all of the power for himself. The final empire had been nothing if not stable. It had lasted 1,000 years, weathering rebellions, maintaining a strong hold on the world. The Lord Ruler was immortal, though. That's an advantage I'll certainly never have. Never say never, Ellen. We don't know the rules.
We don't know. We don't know the rules. This is not. We don't know what this world is about.
The whole first book, we thought we knew the rules, and then it turns out we didn't.
Yeah.
Prediction.
Never say never.
Immortal Ellen.
Lord Ruler Ellen. No. Why not? We actually need a prediction log, okay? Because we don't. We need to actually come up with the document. We need to put it in our document here. Yeah.
The people would still have a king to provide continuity, to be a symbol of unity, a man who wouldn't be tainted by the need to get reappointed. And they would also have an assembly, a council with real legal authority made up of their peers that could voice their concerns. Thus, Elend would craft a stable government. It was a better way. It all sounded wonderful in theory, assuming they survived the next few months. Elend rubbed his eyes, then dipped his pen and began to scratch new sentences at the bottom of the document. So my thought there was something to the effect of, did you give yourself no power as king, Elend?
He's got the right to parlay. That's it.
You have to be just, I'm not saying be a dictator, but have executive authority. Be a president.
Yeah. It sounds like he's he studied this stuff. What do we know? Okay.
Yeah. Kitte here is elevating the quality of this channel, by the way, so much right now as we're doing this. She's doing what we should have done for the first book, and she's writing down these predictions. So
we didn't know what we were going to come up with. We didn't know what we would tend towards when we were recording previously. We now know that we tend to make predictions, and we should try and keep track of them.
Yes.
Okay. In chapter 3, we started doing it. I don't go back and let us know if
first two episodes were short. We can go through.
But hey, we tend to fire off predictions all the time. So even in a short chapter, it's like, yeah.
The Lord Ruler was dead. Even a year later, Vin sometimes found that concept difficult to grasp. The Lord Ruler had been everything. King and God. Small g God there. Lawmaker and ultimate authority. He had been eternal and absolute. And now he was dead. Vin had killed him. Of course, the truth wasn't as impressive as the stories. What are you talking about, Vin? Of course it was. It was an incredible story.
We were very impressed. Thank you.
Yeah. It hadn't been heroic strength or mystical power that had let Vin defeat the Emperor. It was kind of exactly those things, Vin.
Yeah, I mean, they were there. Like, without that, yes, we did notice that, factors came together to make this possible, for sure. Understood. But if she was not mystically powerful, or she wasn't different in some way, we wouldn't have got things. She's trying to cancel out her role in this thing. It's like, no, really, it literally would not have happened without you. Literally.
Yup. She'd merely figured out the trick that he'd been using to make himself immortal, and she'd fortunately, almost accidentally, exploited his weakness. She wasn't brave or clever, just lucky.
Hold up, though. Just conveniently, yeah. Do you think that this is the Lord Ruler? He's had people trying to be him or being against him for thousands of years, okay, or however long. I'm pretty sure people were trying to figure out his trick, okay? And the fact that Vin, out of nowhere, is the one that does it, that is something to be proud of. But I understand Vin is going to be hard on herself, obviously. We don't want Vin to be like, I did it. I'm amazing. Like, that would be disingenuous. I wouldn't be impressed.
Do you think there's going to be a Vin depression arc?
There's always a possibility of that.
Because The prose is reading to me as someone who has depression. Now, I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think it has to be that, but it's a thought that came into my mind.
Oh, it's just this feel of like
There's a
lack of
fine line. Sorry, there's a fine
Mhm.
line between disbelief and depression thinking. Disbelief
emptiness.
is, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Depression is
Mhm.
like, I'm not.
Yeah,
I
no,
cut
but
you off. Sorry.
no, but with depression, so look, let's look at her psyche right now. She's lost Calcia. She's also lost this huge goal that she was supposed to, like, he was everything, and everything was also one of the things when you defeat the big bad, you're like everything will be fine, but that's not the case here. So that's also something that kind of beats you down because you're like, I did the huge thing, guys. I did the impossible, and I still have to fight. But yeah, so you would expect, there is this thing of, oh, now she's aimless because the Lord Ruler was everything she was focused on, but she does have this kingdom to now focus on, but she's still, I know, I see what you're saying about the depression because she's still kind of not feeling well, I guess it's been a bit of time. So we got to keep an eye on whether she feels things or not.
Right. And we know that she's still kind of mourning Kelsier, and
Mhm.
we know she's very paranoid and
Yeah.
neurotic, you could say.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think the possibility is there. I'm not
Mhm.
convinced that it will go there, but the door's open.
Yeah. It is a pathway. The door's open, it's a pathway, and I will go with the door's open. So is that going on the prediction? No. Well,
No,
we could just say that's a theory, but yeah, not a
just
prediction.
an
It's just a
observation.
possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Vin sighed. Her bruises still throbbed, but she had suffered far worse. She sat atop the palace, once Keep Venture, above Ellen's balcony. Her reputation might have been unearned, but it had helped keep Ellen alive. Though dozens of warlords squabbled in the land that had once been the final empire, none of them had marched on Luthadel until now. Fires burned outside the city. Straff would soon learn that his assassins had failed. What then? Assault the city? Ham and clubs warned that Luthadel couldn't hold against a determined attack. Straff had to know that. Still, for the moment, Elend was safe. Finn had gotten pretty good at finding and killing assassins. Barely a month passed that she didn't catch someone trying to sneak into the palace. Many were only spies, and very few were allomancers. But a normal man's steel knife would kill Elend as easily as an allomancer's glass one. She wouldn't let that occur. Whatever else happened, whatever sacrifices it required, Elend had to stay alive.
Yeah. There's a lot of desperation there. You've lost Calcia, so that could just increase your fear of losing everything that you love. She made the choice to stay with Elend and to actually embrace the love that
Yay!
was there, yes, which we were happy about. But now, what can also happen is the same thing, that obsessive kind of, I need to save this. I can't. That I'll be abandoned by this. It's not so much that she's expecting him to be abandon her. It's like she knows people can die, so she's got focused on that. It is a stressful situation. You can't expect her to be like, oh, okay, cool, it's fine. It's like, no, they're basically at war. So her paranoia for Elend is not unfounded, but you can feel that desperation. She's like, I've got to keep him alive.
Suddenly apprehensive, she slipped over to the skylight to check on him. Ellen sat safely at his desk below, scribbling away on some new proposal or edict. Kingship had changed the man remarkably little. At age 23, a little over 4 years her senior, Elend was a man who put great stock in learning but little in appearance. He only bothered to comb his hair when he attended an important function, and he managed to wear even well-tailored outfits with an air of dishevelment. He was probably the best man she had ever known. But what about what about
Yeah.
Kelsier?
Well, Calcia is a bit crazy. So I don't know.
Yeah,
He's the cleanest. This is the fairest. And of course, yeah, she didn't have a crush on Calcia, so it doesn't really work out.
true.
So
What
that's
about
what.
Ham, damn it?
Yeah, what about Ham? What about Spook? Uh, hmm.
Chad Spook. Earnest, determined, clever, and caring, and for some reason, he loved her. At times that fact was even more amazing to her than her part in the Lord Ruler's death. Vin looked up, glancing back at the army lights. Then she looked to the sides. The Watcher had not returned. Often on nights like this, he would tempt her, coming dangerously close to Ellen's room before disappearing into the city.
Of course, if he wanted to kill Ellen, he could just have done it while I was fighting the others.
It's because he's interested in you, Vin, not Ellen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not all about... Look, I know it's all about Ellen for you, but it's not all about Ellen for everyone else.
It was a disquieting thought. Vin couldn't watch Ellen every moment. He was exposed a frightening amount of the time. True, Ellen had other bodyguards, and some were even allomancers, but they were stretched as thin as she was. This night's assassins had been the most skilled and most dangerous that she had ever faced. She shivered, thinking about the Mistborn who had hid among them. He hadn't been very good, but he wouldn't have needed much skill to burn at him, then strike Vin in the exact right place. The shifting mists continued to spin. The army's presence whispered a disturbing truth. The surrounding warlords were beginning to consolidate their domains and were thinking about expansion. Even if Luthadel stood against Straff somehow, others would come.
So there is, I guess, a little bit of an answer to look. They didn't. It seems like they really have had no support from anyone else. So everyone else is just warlords. So there's no one who's wanted to make a deal with them or anything like that. Everyone wants to just take Luthadel.
Yeah. Quietly, Vin closed her eyes and burned bronze, still worried that the Watcher, or some other allomancer, might be nearby planning to attack Ellen in the supposedly safe aftermath of the assassination attempt. Most Mistborn considered bronze to be a relatively useless metal, as it was easily negated. With copper, a Mistborn could mask their allomancy, not to mention protect themselves from emotional manipulation by zinc or brass. Most Mistborn considered it foolish not to have their copper on at all times. And yet, Vin had the ability to pierce copper clouds. A copper cloud wasn't a visible thing. It was far more vague, a pocket of deadened air where allomancers could burn their metals and not worry that bronze burners would be able to sense them. But Vin could sense allomancers who used metals inside a copper cloud. She still wasn't certain why. Even Kelsier, the most powerful allomancer she had known, hadn't been able to pierce a copper cloud. Tonight, she sensed nothing. With a sigh, she opened her eyes. Her strange power was confusing, but it wasn't unique to her. Marsh had confirmed that Steel Inquisitors could pierce copper clouds, and she was certain that the Lord Ruler had been able to do so. But why her? Why could Vin, a girl who barely had 2 years training as a Mistborn, do it? There was more. She still remembered vividly the morning when she'd fought the Lord Ruler. There was something about that event that she hadn't told anyone, partially because it made her fear just a bit that the rumors and legends about her were true. Somehow, she'd drawn upon the mists, using them to fuel her allomancy instead of metals.
Woo! I'm glad we're having her thinking about that because, yeah, we don't want you just skipping over that fact, Vin.
Yeah, kind of important.
Yeah, and she is now kind of confirming that it wasn't like a metaphor. You know, it was. Yeah. She does feel like she can't do it. She's tried to do it and hasn't done it again. But that was a thing. She feels like it was real. It wasn't just her imagining it.
And it says instead of metals. Mm-hmm. And order of operations in that chapter, one of her metals ran out, and then she pulled. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a different metal that had run out, but still noteworthy.
Yeah, very.
Imagine an allomancer who doesn't need metal to allomance.
Just do whatever. There's no cooldown. Woo! Yeah, that's God mode. So I mean, even the gods that they fought had to, hacks. That's it. I want, and also I want to hear the legends that can give us some clues about what Vin's thinking, because she's like, oh, maybe the legends. She feared that the legends were true, and it's like, wait, what are they saying about her? Ooh.
Indeed, I want to know, and then I want to know the truths that. Can you show
me? Sorry.
Always happy to break into song with you, Cadet. I want to know what truths Sazed is spreading about her.
There we go, yes.
Yeah. It was only with that power, the power of the mists, that she had been able to beat the Lord Ruler in the end. She liked to tell herself that she had simply been lucky in figuring out the Lord Ruler's tricks. But there had been something strange that night, something she'd done, something she shouldn't have been able to do and had never been able to repeat. Vin shook her head. There was so much they didn't know, and not only about Allomancy. She and the other leaders of Elend's fledgling kingdom tried their best, but without Kelsier to guide them, Vin felt blind. Plans, successes, and even goals were like shadowy figures in the mist, formless and indistinct. That connects very directly to the shadowy figure in the mists she's about to meet, yeah?
Mm-hmm. And connects very much to the depression that you were talking about. Like literally, like yes, plans. That's having hopelessness, right? You don't hopeless. It's all you don't see where you're going to go. You feel blind, but it does say successes and even goals were like shadowy figures. So like even successes that they may have had are just misty and formless. You shouldn't have left us, Kel. You saved the world, but you should have been able to do it without dying.
Kelsier.
Yeesh.
Yeesh.
Sorry, I'm just like, yeesh, come on. Like, look, he was trying his best. Sorry, I had to add that reaction in there.
Yeah, I mean, she's clearly still very angry about it, but I'm not so sure it could have been done any other way.
Yep, same.
Listen, when we get Brandon Sanderson on this podcast, we will ask him, hey, was there a way that Kelsier could have survived through the whole thing? Could he have done it?
What was he considering being alive?
Yeah.
Next week on the No One Asked You podcast. I'm kidding.
Kelsier, the survivor of Hathsin, the man who had conceived and implemented the collapse of the final empire. Vin had known him, worked with him, been trained by him. He was a legend and a hero. Yet he had also been a man, fallible, imperfect. It was easy for the common ska of the city to revere him, then blame Elend and the others for the dire situation that Kelsier had created. That seems a very, I mean, it's accurate, but also nihilistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, oh, well, let's not take, are you saying like, who's being nihilistic here?
Vin is. Like, yes, Kelsier contributed to the environment that they are now in, but are you really going to tell me it wasn't worth it?
Yeah. Is this better? Is this not better? Like, but she is, I guess that is just, that thought is also just to help us think about the state of the scar.
Yeah.
Have a bit more of exposure to what they're on about. They're not angry with Kelsier.
Yeah.
So that does lend itself to what we were talking about the religion, to see where that's going. And they revere him. And that also just considering goes back to Elend not being Scar as well. I wonder if that's part of it as well. It's just like, we're going to hold on to the Scar hero. The king is
Yeah. The thought left her feeling bitter. Thinking about Kelsier often did that. Perhaps it was the sense of abandonment, or perhaps it was the uncomfortable knowledge that Kelsier, like Vin herself, didn't fully live up to his reputation. Vin sighed, closing her eyes, still burning bronze. The evening's fight had taken a lot out of her, and she was beginning to dread the hours she still intended to spend watching. It would be difficult to remain alert when she sensed something. Vin snapped her eyes open, flaring her tin. She spun and stooped against the rooftop to obscure her profile. There was something out there burning metal. Bronze pulses thumped, weakly, faint, almost unnoticeable, like someone playing drums very quietly. They were muffled by a copper cloud. The person, whoever it was, thought that their copper would hide them. So far, Vin hadn't left anyone alive, save Elend and Marsh, who knew of her strange power. Good. That's I'm dark but good.
It's cool. It's a cool way of putting it. It's like, I didn't leave anyone alive. And that's how she killed them.
Yeah.
Unknowing they were there.
Vin crept forward, fingers and toes chilled by the roof's copper sheeting. She tried to determine the direction of the pulses. There was something odd about them. She had trouble distinguishing the metals her enemy was burning. Was that the quick beating thump of pewter? Or was it the rhythm of iron? The pulses seemed indistinct, like ripples in a thick mud. They were coming from somewhere very close, on the rooftop, right in front of her. Okay, I feel like this little section here is really important. We know from a few paragraphs ahead that this is some sort of misty creature.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that she can't tell what kind of metal this misty creature is burning, which I'm willing to predict here is all of the above. And if she determined that she used the mists to fuel her allomancy in the fight with the Lord Ruler, then who's to say that the mists are not made up of all of the metals in some way, shape, or form? Or maybe when a mistborn dies, they become the mist. And maybe this is Kelsier looking after her or something. No, or maybe this is a consequence of her drawing on the mists to fuel her allomancy. I'm
There's
fairly
so many
confident.
possibilities.
There are so many possibilities. I'm fairly confident that this is connected to the deepness and to whatever it was that stabbed Fedek, but there are options.
Yeah, there are options indeed. And look, we do know that, from the POV of a Steel Inquisitor, there's metals in everything. So that thing of there being metal in the mists makes sense to me in some way, shape, or form, or some element that she can draw on. It doesn't have to be metal, just an element. Not, and I know elements. You know what? Just let me use the word element without trying to get scientific. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I also just I wonder. Okay, I want this to happen again so I can have more data points as well. Because I want to know, does this happen when Vin is in a certain mood? Yeah. Oh, questions, because so many possibilities.
So many.
It's some syndrome, early book syndrome. Like, oh, questions. Well, I guess we always have questions, no matter what, actually. Brandon Sanderson syndrome. Yeah.
Exactly. Vin froze, crouching, the night breezes blowing a wall of mist across her. Where was he? Her senses argued with each other. Her brawn said there was something right in front of her, but her eyes refused to agree. She studied the dark mists, glanced upward to be certain, then stood.
This is the first time my bronze has been wrong.
Then she saw it. Not something in the mists, but something of the mists. The figure stood a few feet away, easy to miss, for its shape was only faintly outlined by the mist. Vin gasped, stepping backward. The figure continued to stand where it was. She couldn't tell much about it. Its features were cloudy and vague, outlined by the chaotic churnings of wind-blown mist. If not for the form's persistence, she could have dismissed it, like the shape of an animal seen briefly in the clouds. But it stayed. Each new curl of the mist added definition to its thin body and long head, haphazard yet persistent. It suggested a human, but it lacked the watcher's solidity. It looked wrong. Interesting here that she connects it to the watcher.
Mm-hmm.
What if it is unironically another allomancer, like another power? Maybe this is that metal that we don't know. The 11th metal was the gold opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So what if there's a metal that literally turns you into mist?
I feel like that's not. I mean, that's a possibility, but I don't feel like it's not plausible. I don't feel like it's words. Come on, likely. There you go.
Gotcha.
Wow, Chintzia, likely. Yes, that's a word that is often used. Gosh.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, I don't think it's uniquely likely. I do think there's something in this idea of a human is turning into the mist in some way. Or maybe it's like piercing the veil in some way, like they're an alternate dimension being.
Yeah, that's what I'm leaning towards. I'm not leaning towards a human doing this. I'm leaning towards it being some entity related to the deepness. Or And I said no. I was going to say or something of in Vin's mind, something that has taken shape. But because just thinking of the voices in her head and things like that. But I feel like if that were true, I would still blame that on the deepness. I'd be like, no, the deepness has taken over her mind, or something like that. Oh, we have no answers.
I bet we'll figure it out by the end of the book.
It's so creepy, though, this thing.
The figure took a step forward. Vin reacted instantly, throwing a handful of coins and pushing them through the air. The bits of metal zipped forward in the mist, trailing streaks, and passed right through the shadowy figure. It stood for a moment, then it simply puffed away, dissipating into the mist's random curls.
Wow.
Yeah, that is creepy.
What a great exit. I don't know why I thought of it as like having a skull. Like I know it doesn't really have form, but it's suggesting a human, and it's got like a long head. No, a long head.
Long head.
So I think of like a deer skull or something like that.
Elend wrote the final line with a flair, though he knew he'd simply have a scribe rewrite the proposal. Still, he was proud. He'd worked out an argument that he thought would finally convince the assembly that they could not simply surrender to Straff. He glanced unconsciously toward a stack of papers on his desk. On their top sat an innocent-seeming yellow letter, still folded, blood-like smudge of wax broken at the seal. The letter had been short. Elend remembered its words easily. Son, I trust you've enjoyed seeing after venture interests in Luthadel. I have secured the northern dominance and will shortly be returning to our keep in Luthadel. You may turn over control of the city to me at that time. King Straff Venture.
Shooey.
Well, that is an entitled and aggressive letter.
Yes. Just here you go. Our keep. Let's think about that. Our keep in Luthadel. Maybe it's like to remind him that it's
Their
not
family.
that's not a collective like family thing. It's more like the only reason you have that is because of me. That's what I'm taking it as. It's not like son, hi son, we'll be reunited soon. No, that's not yours either, and it's our keep because I'm going to go to the palace. So King Straff Venture.
It's
and
reminding
also,
him that he has a claim to that keep.
Yeah, but also that when he goes, I've secured the northern dominance. Like, I'm assuming that that's what you were doing. You were securing stuff for me. So I've secured the northern dominance. I'm coming back. I'll see you soon. Like, it's not even a question that Elend is going to just give over.
Yeah, and that's part of the threat therein.
Yeah, the aggression.
And there's no way Straff doesn't know that Elend is calling himself king.
Yeah, absolutely. This gives me just Straff feelings that I'm just like, Straff, you're a dick.
Such a dick. Of all the warlords and despots that had afflicted the final empire since the Lord Ruler's death, Straff was the most dangerous. Elend knew this firsthand. His father was a true imperial nobleman. He saw life as a competition between lords to see who could earn the greatest reputation. He had played the game well, making House Venture the most powerful of the pre-collapse noble families. Pre-collapse?
What's the name? Capital C. We're calling it the collapse.
I like it. Oh, yes, the year was 52 PC.
Yes, I was about to say. Not exactly that way, but I was going to say PC. Yeah.
Elend's father would not see the Lord Ruler's death as a tragedy or a victory, merely as an opportunity. The fact that Straff's supposedly weak-willed fool of a son now claimed to be king of the Central Dominance probably gave him no end of mirth.
Supposedly weak-willed.
Yeah.
He's not. I'm glad he's saying supposedly. He's not just... Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to have been in Straff Venture's mind when he heard that Elend called himself king and everyone else went along with that.
Yeah. the shock, like, how the hell did he pull that off?
Yeah. I
Because
wish we could see that.
I wonder, will we get a Straff POV? We had one in the
Ooh,
last book. Yeah.
I hope
Well,
so.
not
So
one. It
much.
wasn't a POV of his. It wasn't. No.
No.
No, it was just of around him. We need it.
Yeah.
Okay.
A few more rereads, a few tweaks, and I'll finally be able to get some sleep. A cloaked form dropped from the skylight in the roof and landed with a quiet thump behind him. Elend raised an eyebrow, turning toward the crouching figure. You know, I leave the balcony open for a reason, Vin. You could come in that way if you wanted.
I know.
Vin darted across the room with an Alamancer's unnatural litheness. She checked beneath his bed, then moved over to his closet and threw open the doors. She jumped back with the tension of an alert animal, but apparently found nothing inside that met with her disapproval, for she moved over to peek through the door, leading into the rest of Elend's chambers. Elend watched her with fondness. It had taken him some time to get used to Vin's particular idiosyncrasies. He teased her about being paranoid. She claimed she was merely careful. Regardless, half the time she visited his chambers, she checked underneath his bed and in his closet. The other times she held back, but Elend often caught her glancing distrustfully toward potential hiding places. I like that we're getting these observations through his POV. Sanderson does a really good job of making these idiosyncrasies seem endearing.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they were endearing to us when we were experiencing them ourselves. Like, well, actually, yeah. And when Calcia was seeing them, when other people notice them, you do get that. And also, it's good to show, as we were saying earlier on, it's good to show Elend appreciating that, because we didn't have him noticing that sort of thing when we had the Valette interactions and things like
Yes,
that. So this is a more
exactly.
developed thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We want him to have fondness for what she is now.
Right, because of course there's that fear. Does Elend love Valette or does Elend love Vin?
Yeah.
But also, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you.
Exactly. It's her job. And hello, your king. You literally just spoke about your father being being the kind of guy that fights. Like, just think about it.
She was far less jumpy when she didn't have a particular reason to worry about him, but Elend was only beginning to understand that there was a very complex person hiding behind the face he had once known as Follette Renault's. He had fallen in love with her courtly side without ever knowing the nervous, furtive, Mistborn side. It was still a little difficult to see them as the same person. Finn closed the door, then lingered briefly, watching him with her round, dark brown eyes. Elend found himself smiling. Despite her oddities, or more likely because of them, he loved this thin woman with the determined eyes and blunt temperament. She was like no one he had ever known, a woman of simple yet honest beauty and wit. However, she did sometimes worry him. Vin,
Have you seen anything strange tonight?
aside from you?
Huh?
It
It's cute.
is. She frowned, striding across the room. Elend watched her small form, clothed in black trousers and a man's button shirt, Miss Cloak tassels trailing behind her. She wore the cloak's hood down as usual, and she stepped with a supple grace, the unconscious elegance of a person burning pewter. Focus! You really are getting tired. Vin, what's wrong? Vin glanced toward the balcony.
That Mistborn, the Watcher, is in the city again.
You're sure? Vin nodded.
But I don't think he's going to come for you tonight.
Is that the line?
What? Yeah, it says, but I don't think he's going to come for you tonight. Not for you. I said it badly.
So you do not have a sentence before that?
Yeah, I've got, you're sure? Vin nodded. But I don't think he's going to come for you tonight.
Neat. I have, you're sure? Vin nodded. He saw me fight those assassins, but I don't think he's going to come for you tonight.
Oh, that's quite okay, it's not that bad, but it's like...
It's a whole sentence. That's not just rephrasing.
I think it's just taking out clunkiness, because the fact that she said that Mistborn, the Watcher, is in the city again. Okay, wait a second. No, I was going to say that it's taking out clunkiness that she had already told him about it, but that doesn't make sense. She hadn't. So yeah, he watched me. I guess it's clunky, but that is but that is an important thing to a bit of information that he can then ask a question, could then ask a question about, like, but they've spoken about him before. I guess that's what I got from it, is that yes, they've spoken about him before, that Mistborn, and that's okay. But this time there was pertinent information where you go, oh, he watched me fight and also kind of helped me. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Your sentence, definitely.
You're sure? Vin nodded.
He saw me fight those assassins, but I don't think he's going to come for you tonight.
Ellen frowned. The balcony doors were still open, and trails of mist wafted through them, creeping along the floor until they finally evaporated. Beyond those doors was darkness, chaos. It's only mist, water vapor, nothing to fear. What makes you think the Mistborn won't come for me?
I just feel he won't.
She often answered that way. Vin had grown up a creature of the streets, and she trusted her instincts. Oddly, so did Ellen. He eyed her, reading the uncertainty in her posture. Something else had unsettled her this night. He looked into her eyes, holding them for a moment until she glanced away. What?
I saw something else. Or I thought I did. Something in the mist, like a person formed from smoke. I could feel it too, with Alamancy. It disappeared, though.
Ellen frowned more deeply. It's interesting, like, I obviously made that connection between the epigraphs and the Fedic thing. It makes sense to me that Vin wouldn't immediately go to that, because it's been a year since she read the journal. So
yeah, exactly.
And there's no real other reason that I can think of that she would like immediately make that leap. So
yeah, and yeah, exactly. She was thinking about other things, but she needs to make some sort of leap at some point, because this is quite a big thing. You don't just go, oh, well, that happened anyway. Like, she needs to think about it.
Yeah. Ellen frowned more deeply. He walked forward, putting his arms around her. Vin, you're pushing yourself too hard. You can't keep prowling the city at night and then staying up all day. Even Alamancers need rest. She nodded quietly. In his arms, she didn't seem to him like the powerful warrior who had slain the Lord Ruler. She felt like a woman past the edge of fatigue, a woman overwhelmed by events, a woman who probably felt a lot like Ellen did. She let him hold her. At first, there was a slight stiffness to her posture. It was as if a piece of her still expected to be hurt, a primal sliver that couldn't understand that it was possible to be touched out of love rather than anger. But then she relaxed. Ellen was one of the few she could do that around. When she held him, really held him, she clung with a desperation that bordered on terror. Despite her powerful skill as an Alamancer and her stubborn determination, Vin was frighteningly vulnerable. She seemed to need Ellen. For that, he felt lucky. Yeah, so Vin seems unstable.
Mm-hmm. And they're both. This is a good point to bring up. They're both stretched. They're both overtaxing themselves.
Yeah, they are both exhausted. I really do hope Vin's not getting worse. Like, I know this is our first experience of Ellen experiencing Vin rather than Valette, but I really, really do hope that this isn't a sign. And we commented on the depression angle or interpretation of her POV in this chapter. I do hope she's not getting worse. So
yeah. The words frighteningly vulnerable did make me think. I'm like, yeah, he does. He knows that she clings onto him with the desperation, like that was really powerful. A desperation that bordered on terror. So he knows this, and you took the instability from that. But what I did like there is that Ellen said for that she seemed to need Ellen for that. He felt lucky. So it's not that he's like overwhelmed.
Turned off.
Yeah, he's not overwhelmed by it. He's like, oh, I get to be here for her, which is a good sign for me, because I'm like, I don't want her to be clinging to someone who isn't actually willing to hold on to her as well. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, he's a good guy so far. For that, he felt lucky, frustrated at times, but lucky. Vin and he hadn't discussed his marriage proposal and her refusal, though Elend often thought of the encounter.
Sorry.
I did say that they were basically married in a previous episode, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, you did. Called it, but we both skipped over that. We're like, yeah, well, anyway, they're basically married. And it like, la 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 la, and it's no Vince. I don't know. I want him to think about that interaction now so I can see how it went. But we know how it went.
Yeah. Look, I think it's an incredibly intelligent political move. That way you've got royalty both of noble and of Ska blood and upbringing. And the king that marries the woman that brought down the Lord Ruler. What, if other divine right to lead, are you going to be able to establish? Yeah.
I think that's why we skipped over it and we're like, they're basically married now, because it was just, that's it. It just made so much sense. But I mean, it also makes sense that Vin would be terrified of that sort of thing.
I feel like she might be worried that if she marries him and she accepts that commitment, she's afraid that it'll be that much harder if she lost him. And I think that's the fear that's stopping her. But we haven't had her POV on the matter, so we don't know. But that's my intuition.
Yeah, I agree.
Women are difficult enough to understand, and I had to go and pick the oddest one of the lot. Still, he couldn't really complain. She loved him. He could deal with her idiosyncrasies. Vin sighed, then looked up at him, finally relaxing as he leaned down to kiss her. He held it for a long moment, and she sighed. After the kiss, she rested her head on his shoulder.
We do have another problem. I used the last of the atium tonight.
That's where your sentence ends?
Yeah. Then he goes fighting the assassins.
Interesting. I used the last of the atium tonight, fighting the assassins.
Oh, she said... So he says fighting the assassins, ? So this is not stylistic. But yeah, it's kind of like editing of just... Because she doesn't say fighting assassins. He says fighting assassins, ?
Interesting. Well, we did it my way before. Let's do it your way this time. After the kiss, she rested her head on his shoulder.
We do have another problem. I used the last of the atium tonight.
Fighting the assassins? Well, we knew it would happen eventually. Our stockpile couldn't last forever.
Stockpile? Kelsier only left us 6 beads.
Ellen sighed, then pulled her tight. His new government was supposed to have inherited the Lord Ruler's atium reserves, a putative cache of the metal comprising an amazing treasure. Kelsier had counted on his new kingdom holding those riches. He had died expecting it. There was only one problem. Nobody had ever located the reserve. They had found a small amount, the atium that had made up the bracers that the Lord Ruler had used as a ferrochemical battery to store up age. They had spent those on supplies for the city, and they had actually contained only a small amount of atium. Nothing like what the cache was said to have. There should still be somewhere in the city a wealth of atium thousands of times larger than those bracers. Unless it's been used, Ellen!
By who?
Indeed. We'll simply have to deal with it.
If a Mistborn attacks you, I won't be able to kill him.
Only if he has atium. It's becoming more and more rare. I doubt the other kings have much of it. Kelsier had destroyed the pits of Hathsin, the only place where atium could be mined. Still, if Vin did have to fight someone with atium, don't think about that. Just keep searching. Perhaps we can buy some. Or maybe we'll yet find the Lord Ruler's cache, if it even exists. Vin looked up at him, reading the concern in his eyes, and he knew she had arrived at the same conclusions as he. There was little that could be accomplished at the moment. Vin had done well to conserve their atium as long as she had. Still, as Vin stepped back and let Elend return to his table, he couldn't help thinking about how they could have spent that atium. His people would need food for the winter. But by selling the atium, we would have put more of the world's most dangerous allomantic weapon into the hands of our enemies. Better that Vin used it up. So that was the moment that really had me excited for Ellen's collaborative politics arc in this book. That was where it kind of hit me. Like, he's going to have to deal with people now that will not collaborate under any circumstance.
Yes. The way he has to he knows that he's got to consider weapons and things like that. That's why he's thinking that way. Yeah, he has enemies, and that is a risk factor. That Atium out there is a risk factor.
Yeah. As he began to work again, Vin poked her head over his shoulder, obscuring his lamplight.
What is it?
The proposal blocking the assembly until I've had my right of parley.
Again?
She asked, cocking her head and squinting as she tried to make out his handwriting. The assembly rejected the last version. That was noteworthy. So, first off, what was in that first draft? Was it, hey, I want to talk to my dad first? Because that doesn't seem like an unreasonable request of the king. And then it really, really brings to mind, how much power did Elend as king give up?
Yeah. Is he just a mascot? Like, what is in this? Why? Also, but no, for me, I'm thinking more like, what more could you put into this proposal now? The reasoning.
I think it's just more convincing. I think it's just like another speech.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Like, it's not a bill. It's not like a law he's trying to propose, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. He does not. He doesn't have. He has to propose. He's got to sell stuff to them. Like that's he has no. Just hold on. So yeah, it is, I suppose, another speech. But what you can take from this, yeah, he has to go there, cap in hand, basically, and be like, "This is what I want to do. Let me do it." So this collaborative government is very inconvenient.
Yeah, and look, I know the power of the president in 2024 is vastly increased since the 1700s, since Washington, since Adams, since Jefferson. But even back then, the president had some power. He had a role in the government. He was a full third of the government. So for Elend, as it's being framed right now, to essentially have no real power outside of, I'm the face, I talk to people. It's
and he's the only king that's operating that way, I would assume. There's all these the warlords, right? They're all warlords. They're all, hey, they're generals. They're in control. They're not trying to be collaborative. So he has crippled himself by trying to be fair. So he's got a weakness that he's placed upon himself by trying to be fair and be collaborative in all of this. Whereas his enemies, no, they're hello. His biggest one is his dad, who's just basically a bully. So great struggles to watch Ellen go through.
And look, I'm not for monarchy. I like republics. I like democracies. I like other forms of government that don't involve one specific family being the ruler by dint of birth. But if you're gonna be a kingdom,
be a kingdom. Well, if you're gonna have a king, yeah, maybe, I don't know. What's the point?
Yeah.
Spokesperson of the government, like, okay.
The assembly rejected the last version.
Why don't you just tell them that they have to accept it? You're the king.
Now see, that's what I'm trying to prove by all of this. I'm only one man, Vin. Maybe my opinion isn't better than theirs. If we all worked on the proposal together, it will come out better than if one man had done it himself. Sure. Yes. Feedback is good.
But do we have time for that as well? That's one of the ways that a lot of people, kings or whatever, you take power because you're like, oh, it's wartime.
Exactly. Wartime powers.
Yeah. That happened in Wheel of Time as well. It's like, oh, it's just wartime powers. Sorry. Yeah. I like this. It will be weak. No teeth. You should trust yourself more.
It's not about trust. It's about what's right. We spent 1,000 years fighting against the Lord Ruler. If I do things the same way he did, then what will be the difference?
Look, okay,
Vin-
so over there, yeah, from there, I want to ask, what do you think? I mean, yes, we've established that he's put this, quote, weakness on himself by trying to be fair. But what do you feel towards this decision?
the logic is there. The logic works. I'm with you, Ellen. But just like you seem to be over dramatic in your assessment of Straff, I think you have severely hampered your ability to do anything. And that is a detriment. You are so afraid of what kings could do that in this situation, you have not made yourself a co-equal branch of government. You have made yourself just a figurehead. So why are you even trying now?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like, he hasn't. So on one hand, he's trying to not overcorrect correct things, but he is overcorrecting.
Yes. Well said. Much more succinct than what I had said. And it's like, okay, if you're just a figurehead, Ellen, why are you trying to sway the assembly? They will figure it out, won't they? Won't they?
They're the all-knowing, right? And there's more people. The power of many. So.
So yes, it seems as if he has course corrected over
course corrected.
Yeah. Vin turned and looked him in the eyes.
The Lord Ruler was an evil man. You're a good one. That's the difference.
It's that easy for you, isn't it? Vin nodded. Ellen leaned up and kissed her again. Well, some of us have to make things a little more complicated, so you'll have to humor us. Now kindly remove your stuff from my light so I can get back to work. She snorted, but stood up and rounded the desk, leaving behind a faint scent of perfume. Ellen frowned. When she put that on? Many of her motions were so quick that he missed them. Perfume. Another of the apparent contradictions that made up the woman named Vin. She wouldn't have been wearing it out in the mists. She usually put it on only for him. Vin liked to be unobtrusive, but she loved wearing scents and got annoyed at him if he didn't notice when she was trying out a new one. She seemed suspicious and paranoid, yet she trusted her friends with a dogmatic loyalty. She went out at night in black and gray, trying so hard to hide, but Ellen had seen her at the balls a year ago, and she had looked natural in gowns and dresses. For some reason, she had stopped wearing those. She hadn't ever explained why. So, an important thing, perfume. Did you associate perfume in your mind with the mists in any way, reading that?
No.
Okay. For some reason, they are connected in my mind. This lingering scent, this thing in the air that trails after you. I feel like there's a connection there, and I don't know. Yeah, go on.
They certainly do have, like, when you were listing the similarities they have between them, like lingering in the air, following you around, swirling around you, that sort of thing. I can see why they would have the same sort of place in your mind, but I don't know in the story if you're getting at something in the story.
I think Brandon Sanderson is attempting to build something here, be it a simile or an allegory or whatever fancy literary term authors come up with for these kinds of things. But it's still so early in the book that I feel like I'm just looking through the keyhole, but I think there's some sort of connection there to be made.
Well, he has used it obviously to just build upon, the relationship and what's happening between them two, and what Vin's behavior has been like in the past year. She still wears scent, so she does like and she even tries different perfumes and things like that. So that's a little bit of Valette coming through, but then she doesn't wear the gowns. So that he's used that, but at the same time, I think there might be a mechanical reason for mentioning this scent that comes up later. So keyhole indeed.
Yeah. And also, she's stopped wearing dresses, even though she could now if she wanted.
Yeah, there's just no need. Okay, she's left that behind. Maybe she did say she was not valid. I think in the she had that, so that's why she had said it. Well, that's why she's done it. She didn't say why to him, but she can't go back to being valid.
True.
But there's bits of her that were in valid that were Vin,
yes.
Such as liking perfume.
Ellen shook his head, turning back to his proposal. Next to Vin, politics seemed simplistic. She rested her arms on the desktop, watching him work, yawning. You should get some rest. Vin hesitated, then nodded. She removed her mist cloak, wrapped it around herself, then curled up on the rug beside his desk. I thought that was... Yeah, I chuckled too. I thought it was very endearing.
Yeah.
Jinx. I didn't mean here, Vin.
There's still a Mistborn out there somewhere. I'm not leaving you.
She twisted in the cloak, and Ellen caught a brief grimace of pain on her face. She was favoring her left side. She didn't often tell him the details of her fights, not wanting to worry him. It didn't help. Ellen pushed down his concern and started reading again. He was almost finished. Just a bit more and... A knock came at his door. Ellen turned with frustration, wondering at this new interruption. Ham poked his head in the doorway a second later. Ham? You're still awake? Unfortunately. Mardra's going to kill you for working late again. Oh, I assume that's his wife, yeah?
Yeah, she's in Luthadel.
We got a name. Complain though he might about some of Vin's quirks, at least she shared Ellen's nocturnal habits. Ham rolled his eyes at the comment. He still wore his standard vest and trousers. He'd agreed to be the captain of Ellen's guard on a single condition, that he would never have to wear a uniform. Vin cracked an eye as Ham wandered into the room, then relaxed again. Classic Ham.
Yes, indeed.
Easy and well established.
Good to see him.
Now,
yeah, good to see him.
Good to see him. Do you think being captain of Ellen's guard is a promotion or a demotion from being of the aristocracy? Because I'm assuming that various Ska families have been elevated to aristocracy. Primarily among them would be the crew themselves, right?
But what would it mean to be aristocracy? Take over keeps and things like that? What does that mean?
I want to say noble, but I know that there's still a distinction between the nobleman and the Ska. Just of a family who contributed to the world or the kingdom in some tremendously important way. And what more important way than helping to defeat the Lord Ruler? So
you're basically you're saying like it's how it would happen in England, where it's like, oh, you get a lordship or you become the Duke of this or whatever
right.
as a result. So you're saying Ham should have that, not just like be captain of the guards.
Right. And I suppose I had just kind of tacitly assumed that the crew were all now noblemen of a sort, if not by blood, by action. And
I didn't go there. I didn't assume that. I don't know why. I think maybe it's because of the way the crew is. I just assumed they would have roles in the government, but I didn't think that they would be comfortable with anything noble.
Well, that's why I said aristocracy more so than noble. Is because I think of aristocracy, I think of prestigious families.
Yeah. But what they're doing is not different, I would say. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't feel like they would be moved into a different kind of living. They're doing stuff. They're being functional. And when I think of aristocracy, I'm just like, you're just sitting there and you're just there. That's what I mean.
Gotcha. Interesting. Well,
we'll see where the crew is. What did That's a lot of the questions. What is the structure? Who is in the assembly?
Regardless, to what do I owe the visit? I thought you might want to know that we identified those assassins who tried to kill Vin. Probably men I know. Most Alamancers were noblemen, and he was familiar with all of those on Straff's retinue. I doubt it. They were Westerners. Ellen frowned and Vin perked up.
You're sure?
Ham nodded. Makes it a bit unlikely that your father sent them, unless he's done some heavy recruiting in Fadrix City. They were of houses Gardray and Conrad, mostly. Ellen sat back. His father was based in Urtro, hereditary home of the Venture family. Fadrex was halfway across the Empire from Urtro, several months' worth of travel. The chances were slim that his father would have access to a group of Western Alamancers. Have you heard of Ashweather Set? Elend nodded. One of the men who set himself up as king in the Western dominance. I don't know much about him.
You think he sent these?
Ham nodded. They must have been waiting for a chance to slip into the city, and the traffic at the gates these last few days would have provided the opportunity. That makes the arrival of Straff's army and the attack on Vin's life something of a coincidence. Elend glanced at Vin. She met his eyes, and he could tell that she wasn't completely convinced that Straff hadn't sent the assassins. Elend wasn't so skeptical. Pretty much every tyrant in the area had tried to take him out at one point or another. Why not Set? It's that Atium. He'd never found the Lord Ruler's cache, but that didn't stop the despots in the Empire from assuming he was hiding it somewhere. Well, at least your father didn't send the assassins, Ham said, ever the optimist. Elend shook his head. Our relationship wouldn't stop him, Ham. Trust me. He's your father. Things like that don't matter to Straff. He probably hasn't sent assassins because he doesn't think I'm worth the trouble. If we last long enough, though, he will. Ham shook his head. I've heard of sons killing their fathers to take their place, but fathers killing their sons? I wonder what that says about old Straff's mind, that he'd be willing to. You think that, Ham? Yes? You know I'm usually good for a discussion, but I don't really have time for philosophy right now. Oh, yay, they're friends.
Oh, yeah, but we want them to talk. I mean, they're philosophers. They like chatting about things and morals, and it makes sense that they would be friends.
Yeah.
Or they could relate on that. Not that they would be friends, Scar noblemen, but yeah, they can relate on that. Also, just by the way, in my book it says, I wonder what that says about old Straff's mind that he'd be willing to kill you. So like, I know it's not a huge change, but it's like just reminding us that yeah, he's willing to kill you. Like properly phrased it that way.
Yeah. Interesting.
Kill.
There were kill you.
Sorry.
Oh, right. Ham smiled wanly, turning to go. I should get back to Mardra anyway. Elend nodded, rubbing his forehead and picking up his pen yet again. Make sure you gather the crew for a meeting. We need to organize our allies, Ham. If we don't come up with something incredibly clever, this kingdom may be doomed. Ham turned back, still smiling. You make it sound so desperate, Al. Elend looked over at him. The assembly is a mess. A half-dozen warlords with superior armies are breathing down my neck. Barely a month passes without someone sending assassins to kill me, and the woman I love is slowly driving me insane. Vince snorted at this last part. Oh, is that all? See, it's not so bad after all. I mean, we could be facing an immortal god and his all-powerful priests instead. Ellen chuckled despite himself. Good night, Ham, he said, turning back to his proposal. Good night, Your Majesty.
He's got a point there. It's a good way of looking at things. Like, listen, guys, we faced impossible odds before. Do you see this? Like, hello. We need that energy because we've got the desperation of Vin and Elend. You need that optimism. You need to remind them that actually, and use the power, draw from that fight that you had, that impossible thing that you achieved, draw from that as a source of confidence that no, I dealt with that, I'll deal with this. I dealt with that let's make this work, So yay, Ham. Love Ham.
We need that dose of optimism.
Yeah.
Oh, so this was a really good chapter. It spawned a lot of thinking in me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not a lot. Obviously, not a lot of action or whatever. We've had our action chapter. Okay.
Yeah.
We did have. We had the mist thing. What are we gonna call it? It's not a wraith. So, what do we call it here? Mist
The
thing.
mist
Yeah.
shade.
Mist shade. Yeah. So that was very exciting. It's all setting a foundation. All of these questions to be answered.
Yeah.
All of these things to be clarified. We still don't have the state of the world exactly. We don't know what's happening with the crew. He still calls he calls it the crew, which was I liked. That was quite cool. That the king is like, we're gonna call the crew together, and you're just like, yeah. So that is just how they refer to it. And the crew is not the assembly, of course. Like, so yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Subscribe to That Darn Kitty. She's got a wonderful channel where she does diagram streams and panel shows and sometimes gaming streams where she swears a lot. It's
I'm
very
sorry.
fun. We've got a link to the Discord in my channel description, so join the Discord.
We'll see you there.
Okay, thanks
for
bye.
listening. Yeah, okay.
And thanks for listening. Bye.
Okay, let's just say bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks, bye.
2 hours later. Okay, thanks, bye.
Dorkus and I are both going, yeah, blah, 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 blah. She can't read. You shouldn't have left us, Cole. Sorry, why do words just not? Why are words